So Rich Fischer, this is a thrill. Thank you, because there's nobody who knows more about everything in Chautauqua County than Rich Fischer. I mean, your history knowledge base is unbelievable. And just for by way of background, how did you get here? Is your mom and dad, are they natives?
My mom was born at the corner of 8th and Prendergast in Jamestown. And my dad was born in Sandusky, Ohio, and they moved. My grandmother and my father, my grandfather died in the alcohol, and my grandmother and my dad moved to Lincoln Street back, I'm not sure what year it was, but anyhow, they basically wound up in Jamestown. My dad worked for Gulf Oil. There used to be a Gulf gas station right up here. Between the mobile station that Joe Bessie had and Joe Pline had here. My dad had the Gulf station in between, sold it to Bert Lesser, who sold it to George Matson. My dad, before he had that one, there used to be a Gulf station down the corner of 8th and Main, where Furch's Baking used to be. And he had that Gulf gas station. And then he went to work for Treat and Ogilvy, which was where the Ironstone used to be. They sold like Canada Dry and stuff like that. And then he went to work for Smith Kale Gulf Oil up in Boomertown. My mom, from the time she was 16, worked at Shea's Theater selling tickets until Shea's Theater closed. And then she also worked for my uncle, who had the Lakewood Motel. She took care of his books in that form at the Lakewood Motel. Grew up on Marvin Avenue, moved there in 1944. And moved across the street. My Uncle Johnny built a house, Ford prefab, first prefab in Lakewood. And so that was 1948. So grew up in Lakewood and moved out for a few years and that. But we've been back there since 2006. So.
And you worked, I have in my memory of you working at the telephone company.
40 years I worked at the telephone company from 1964 to 2004. And 2004 retired. And January 2005, I became an employee of the Robert H. Jackson Center.
How did that happen?
I think it was Randy that somehow met somewhere, somehow, through the community foundation, and he said, "You looking for something?" I said, "Yeah, wouldn't mind." He said, "Well, come and talk to us." And so I went over and talked to Raleigh, and we had a nice conversation. And 1st of January 2005, I started.
Did you know of the connect between the telephone company and Robert Jackson? You aware of that at the time?
There's something going on, but I right now I could not remember.
No, well, back in Johnson, her name was Johnson, who worked at the time, I think it's Altel. Jackson was the attorney for John Wright.
Okay.
And therefore there's a whole connect. And they had done a phone book on Lucille Ball.
Right. Remember that.
Lucille Ball cover and all that stuff. And so I met with her, Karen Johnson. Excuse me,
right.
Karen Johnson. And I said, Karen, because of that connection, Jackson, we were just starting. And somehow the bigwigs at Altel bought into Karen's argument and mine. And I met with the manager here. And then the next cover, the next year,
yep.
was all Jackson.
Right.
Very sexy looking thing. And it was really our first document that was a phone book.
That was public out there, and everybody could see it, and everybody wanted it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was the greatest distribution. But Karen was the one inside who made that happen.
Karen and I left the telephone company the same day.
No kidding.
Yep, exactly. Same day. Yep.
I remember we had an event it's funny, I haven't thought about this in a long time. We had an event rolling it out at the Jackson Center, honoring Karen, and just, everybody passing out a phone book.
We had a lot of them left over there, and then they started going, and people still wanted them. We took them up at Chautauqua, and people took them and that, and yeah, we got rid of a lot of them. And it was a great public display of Mr. Jackson. Yeah, but that really was.
That was all town. They paid for it. I mean, it was great on all fronts.
Yeah.
So you're there in 2005. At the time, who else was working there?
Raleigh, Kidder, and Becky Robbins, and Mrs. Drake.
Yeah.
Mrs. Drake. Mrs. Drake was always like this to me.
So who, as you were there as sort of the jack of all trades in the building, maintenance and mowing and everything, so you got to see a lot.
Yes.
Yep. On the inside, more so than guys like myself who were flying at 10,000 feet. What was your sense of kind of the operations? Because it was new. We just were only 4 years old at the time.
Well, it was very strange, and you know, the building was different. Dance floor down in where the banquet room is now, you know, and it was, and then I remember they brought a lady in. I can't remember what her name was. Not too tall. They were bringing people in to talk about their life in Germany and that. And I can still remember that. That was like in June that they brought her in. April or June, can't remember. But anyhow, they had brought the kids in to watch her and listen to her. And you think the 8th graders and 7th graders are going to be yakking. You could have heard a pin drop when that lady spoke. It was just that emotional for kids. And that was my first meeting person that they had brought in, you know, and I was just fascinated by that woman, and she was really something.
Lily Silberger, I think was
I don't think so. No.
Was she a Holocaust survivor?
Yes, okay. But short, gray-haired, older lady, but
probably from Buffalo.
Yeah, she was just a really super nice person.
So that was your first exposure to talent that we brought in.
Yep.
And bringing in the educational components. And that became sort of a theme where we'd have throughout the year buses come rolling in and going through, and the Aaron Beckwiths of the world, and young readers. We had various authors.
A lot of those, yep, exactly. And was the lady, I was trying to think what her first name was, that was in charge of that most of the time. Her husband worked up the airport.
Sanctuary.
Yeah, Anita Sanctuary. Yep, exactly. And she really did a great job. And, you know, the Dolsons that were there with, you know, Gloria Lasser and Jim Arias, or not Arias, that's the tennis player. Oriole, yep, lived up on Prospect there. And, you know, there was some great Dolsons that just knew Jackson stuff forwards and backwards, you know, and it was so interesting to hear them talking to people that came into the museum, you know, and they just really knew what was happening. So it was great with those people. And a lot of good people that worked there, you know. I think of all the women that worked there. My list says,
go ahead.
You know, Carol and Becky and Kathy Tucker and Deb Pecos and Sherry and Sonia and Tracy Bogdan, you know, and they just were all such nice, great people. Deb Pecos is another one, Allie Johnson and Sherry now, you know, it's but the leader of the pack is the first one, Carol.
Tell me about, how did Carol treat you?
When this went like this, you knew you better get it done, because and we still kid about it, that you know, when the finger starts wagging at you, you better hop to it, you know. So, and we went through the Raleigh and Adam Bratton and Don Greenhouse and Dick Kaufman, yep, and then of course Jim Johnson and Sue Murphy, and all super good people, you know. You learn a lot from them, and they did a lot of pluses for not only the Jackson Center but for Jamestown, you know. So
as they would prepare for certain major events, and I know during this time period we had Chief Justice Roberts. Do you remember kind of some of the background prep for that?
It was crazy. taking stuff from downstairs upstairs and making sure this was right and that was right, and it just was a lot of work, but it was all worth it. I mean, that working at the Visitors Bureau of Chautauqua, when I say Little Jamestown or Little Chautauqua had 3 Supreme Court justices here in the same year, in that Sotomayor and Justice Roberts, and then Kennedy.
Yeah.
I mean, how you just can't imagine. You just wouldn't think it's possible that Little Jamestown and Little Chautauqua had 3. It's what an honor, It's just really an honor. So it's great. Then we were saying about the kids being there. Some of the things that happened, I wrote down a few of the things that
Sure.
had happened as we went along. One of the meetings, we had an alarm system, and the alarm system, I was on call if something happened. Well, got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. The police were checking the building. They found the door open up on top of there's a stairs that goes up outside the auditorium. Well, one of the kids had opened that door and then not closed it back up. And unbeknownst to anybody, the police came through and they found the door open. They called me and we went down there, and boy, we went through every inch of that building looking, because we didn't know whether somebody had come in or not, And the one scary thing is that I was walking with a couple. We had been away up in the attic, and we came down and we went to go into the basement. And as we came around the corner, here comes another policeman that had been down there, and we didn't know he was there. And we come around the corner, and both, and the alarm would go off because the ice would fall on the front roof, or a truck would go around the corner, and the vibration of it going over the curb would vibrate the building, actually. So it set off the alarms. And then a couple of Carol's favorite things was we get bats in the building at times. And, the motion detectors would set off because of the, and they'd call and you'd go down and, but, it's just some of the things.
She was not a fan of bats.
Oh, no. Just like my wife is not a fan of snakes. It's my wife once did a 100-yard dash in 2.3 seconds because she stepped on a snake. But yeah, we used to have MRC used to have meetings. They're voting for their union and that. Yeah. So I'd go in at 4 o'clock in the morning and open up, because their 4 o'clock shift would be coming off at work, and they'd come up and they'd hear their speech and that kind of stuff. So that we'd open up at 4 o'clock in the morning for MRC. Yeah, so we did that. Setting up, remember we used to have lunch, or they'd have I don't want to say a party, but a get together at the Goodell's up at Chautauqua. And I'd come down and get all these tables and chairs and haul them out to Chautauqua. They'd have the big summer fest, basically. And then next morning you go up and haul them all back, and that was always a yearly thing. And then all the setting up for all the different situations, whether it was the kids or can't remember what they called it when they had all the suppliers come in, and you'd have the hockey people in talking and all those kind of things. And
those are the continuing legal education programs.
Yep. And then they'd rent it out, and they'd have dance shows, or they had the flower group in there, and they'd have flower shows in there, and you were carrying tables from upstairs to downstairs and back downstairs, and they being an older gentleman, they weren't the white plastic ones, they were the old metal and wood. And so there was
they were heavy.
Yeah.
They were heavy.
Yep, and you'd move them all upstairs and set them up upstairs, and then, and then, like I said, the first remodeling I remember is the dance floor. When we first came to work, the dance floor down in the banquet room, and that was the old consistory. They had that, and it was pretty cool. I think the building, when you came in when I first came to work, no elevator in it, you know, and a couple guys from Brockton wound up putting that elevator in, and then the consistory was still there, and they had all their I don't want to call them uniforms, costumes back behind the stage and behind the seating, and then they had another big room that's now the archives that was
memory,
yeah, it was pretty cool. And upstairs was just a mess at the time, and then they made the offices upstairs. So and now you see it today, and it's incredible. It's just incredible. All the remodeling this went through, and before remodeling, I can also remember how many times I get a call from Carol. The basement's flooded, or the kitchen's flooded, because there was a place where they had put air conditioning in outside that somehow had done something to the wall outside the kitchen and come down, and it would, if it rained hard, that water would come down in there, and that you'd go down there and take buckets full of water out. And then there was a problem in the actual basement down by where the heat came in from the water from the city, and that down there around the old boiler and that, yep, that used to get flooded down in there, and we'd have to go and clean all that up and that kind of stuff. And all the setting up of all the Christmas trees, you know, we'd have 6, 7 Christmas trees all over the place, and Mrs. Bratton had given us that one great big one we had in the front room there that was always just a spectacular thing, and had the wreaths, and we just had just great Christmas stuff in there. So we'd always keep it up until after the visit Jamestown, or, you know, and then we'd take it down. So we put up in just before Thanksgiving, so we had it up for a long time, and people really enjoyed coming in and seeing that stuff. So, and I guess, yeah, the dance floor and the setting up of all the different stuff, and setting up Christmas, plus in the basement. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I don't want to mention that one of the employees fell through the ceiling.
That was an instructive moment for all of us.
Yes, it was. It was. We were going to change some lights up there, and we went up there, and there's no real flooring. You had to walk on the 2x4s, and the young lady that went up there with me happened to have slippery shoes, and it was a scary, scary moment, I'll tell you. She went down between those rafters, and luckily she was able to catch her arms on it, and I was able to get her back up. But that was a scary moment. That was the scariest I've been in a long time.
Yeah.
So
For all, yeah, and I'm so delighted you were there to make that happen. So,
yeah,
yeah, that was. We have an old building. Anyway, it has an older building. You know, much of that was the 18s. You know,
1850s, wasn't it?
Yeah, 1858 it was built, and so you're working with old electricity, and you're working with old buildings, and jerry-rigged for a long time by the Masons. I mean, God bless them, but to save money, they jerry-rigged an awful lot, and it really, other than some of the old-timers kind of helping us to figure out where things were, like John Fuchs.
Yeah, I just was going to say, John Fuchs did an amazing job with that auditorium and all the lighting and all the sound and all that stuff back in there, and he was quite the person. And
Absolutely.
just another quick little thing on John is that we're putting his son asked if we could put a dedication bench for him up at the community park up in Lakewood, up by the dog park there, because his mom and dad always loved to go down there and sit there and look over the lake. So we're putting so John I think had an apartment there at one time even.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I interviewed John a few years ago, and he gave me great detail about the building, his experience, shoestring players.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And living there, and kind of the quid pro quo working with the Masons is, if you let me live here, I'll do all this stuff. So it was sort of a barter system. Yeah. So John ultimately knew everything there was to know, and Raleigh Kidder used him and did others to saying, where are these things and how can we improve it? And he did terrific improvements.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, he did, because boy, there's a lot of electrical type of stuff and crazy things in back in there, you know, that he took care of, because there was stuff that was, I mean, we used to say at times there was a ghost of Jackson there, because lights would be off, but yet it turned off, yet you'd come in from one day to the next and the light was on, but it was still turned off. And we couldn't figure out, and that happened more than once. And and we said, you know, it was the ghost of Robert Jackson that was still in the building then. But being John, he figured out what was going on, so took care of it.
I can remember events we had where I'd be interviewing somebody and all of a sudden there'd be on the lights, so this would be kind of stage left, you know, up there just.
Yeah.
And then you look at anybody, they didn't know how to get rid of that?
Yeah.
It just came on and off, like a strobe light.
Yep, and like I say, it was turned off. I mean, it wasn't really on. What was happening? I'm not an electrician, that's for sure.
No. But you know, you saw so much, Rich. People coming and going and the flow of it all. And you being a historian, did you get more of a sense of Jackson having worked there?
It almost seemed that way, you know. It seemed like at a lot of those, because the people were so knowledgeable, and that Jackson was standing right there beside him, almost telling these people these things, you know. And he just, it was a sense that he was there, many times. And it was people that come in. Another story I remember, that speaking about people there was Jim Sorg.
Yes.
That was another night that unreal.
Well, I think all of us teared up as you're starting to tear up thinking about it, because I knew a little bit of the story. Most of the family had no idea the full story, or just a little bit, and it tied in with the theme of the speaker, the young leader speaker.
Yep.
It was sort of a Norway thing, and during the World War II, and here's Jim's story is beyond something anybody could write.
Right, exactly.
And we captured it on film. He captured the emotion. He had no notes. I remember that night so distinctly, and Jim was thrilled when it got done. He said he was emotionally wrought when he got done.
Yep.
He said, you know, this drained me, but I'm glad you did what you did. Carol Sorg called. Everybody called the next day like, wow, thank you. For us, it was like, wow, thanks for sharing.
It was incredible story.
Yeah.
It really was. And, you know, like I say, I talked to Steve, his son, and Steve didn't really know hardly any of it.
Yeah.
You know, and it just is something that Jim just kept inside of him, and finally it came out, and it was another one of those times where you could have heard a pin drop. Oh. You know, just, yeah.
Even the author, and I think the author was Jane Yolen, who had written the book. Of course, it was a fictional book, but she just, you know, said she had tears in her eyes throughout that whole presentation.
Yeah.
Wishing she could go on the road with him, because that story is so compelling.
Yeah, it really was. So that's the kind of thing that, you know, I mean, that was the Second World War, and that's the way, you know, here goes a kid and his mom to Sweden and Norway, and got stuck, couldn't come back, and the whole world changed. He saw things over there. Remember him saying about his friends and their parents were just, all of a sudden, the Germans would come in and just take them, you know. Just, we're lucky to live the way we do today. We are just lucky. No
question. So what other highlights there might be, Rich? You saw 13 years worth of this stuff, and by the way, for the camera, he continues to hawk us wherever it is. He's a big ambassador for the Jackson Center. Anything else that we kind of, as you think back, a little kind of a memory?
No, it's just I just totally enjoyed all the years I was there and all the people, the people I worked with and all the people that, Phil Donahue being there. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. And you got to meet people that you would never think you'd meet, and it was just some great years of great people, not only working with them and of course the guy that was the CEO was a pretty good guy too. And we still see each other at coffee once in a while.
And make up stories.
Yeah. Almost 80 years old and I've had a pretty good life and met a lot of good people, and working at Chautauqua I met a lot of good people up there too, and it's the Jackson Center was a big plus for me, and I can't thank the people enough for allowing me to work there and enjoy it. So.
Well, we appreciate everything you've done and do, because you're a talking machine and for the good of the cause. So thanks, Rich. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Greg.